Bill made his way through the dilapidated library towards the door that led down to the underground passageway. At one point in time, this was one of Washington, D.C.'s most beautiful historical sites. It had been teeming with unsuspected children with tender flesh. They had no idea this building had been built on top of a doorway to the spiritual world, and that the beings that entered in and out of that doorway looked to feed on as many of them that could disappear without anybody being the wiser. He chuckled. That was back before the flare hit, when times were good and the food supply was plenty. Now, the dilapidated ruins were just a hollow place filled with blood fiends that were drawn to the activities that went on in the bowels of the earth in this spot. They quickly scattered out of his path as he made his way down the stairs. No doubt they would try to follow at a distance in hopes that they could slip past the Queen's witches that were sure to be guarding the gate unnoticed and find them a meal. He chuckled. Poor souls. They were the bottom feeders, scavengers, lost spirits without a home, hoping that those like Dalla, who were still connected to operating nests, would show them a little mercy and throw them a bone. Many didn't know what actually happened to make those people turn into zombies. And believe it or not, you have the Slayers to thank for that. You see, they had destroyed so many nests, causing the children of the fallen to turn into demon spirits quicker than bodies could be prepared for them. The drug blood had been introduced to help defile their human hosts at a faster rate. But something happened when the flare hit. A shift in the atmosphere. In 1 hour, there were millions of hosts suddenly ready to be inhabited. Demon spirits that had not eaten or tasted the sweet tang of blood or slacked their lust in ages suddenly found homes. Generally, a human body could only house one demonic spirit, maybe two. But these bodies after the flare hit could house legions. Some think the drug has something to do with it. Hell, maybe it did. Dalla didn't know or care to investigate it. But he couldn't help but wonder at the irony. Now that those poor, displaced souls were able to eat, the food supply had dwindled down to nothing, so they hung out in hordes around operating nests that still grew human flesh, hoping to grasp a hold of the scraps. Hell, before the flare hit, this library would have been an easy feeding ground. It had been built on top of a ley line that was protected by a treaty signed by the Ancient Ones and the Queen herself, way back before this land was so-called discovered. Back then, Sarima, the Whore Queen's temple, in all its glory sat where the charred remains of the White House now sits. However, her palace has always sat underneath it, where she's ruled over the whole world for thousands of years. The ancient people of this land used to kill their own in daily sacrifices to keep her thirst for blood quenched. And in return, she used her wiles to keep this land rich, only to later betray them and lure the very people that would be their end. But that's what the Whore Queen does. She uses you until you have no more to offer her, and then she discards you like trash. The people that she lured to this land were a strong people whose thirst for power almost equaled her own. Almost. That's when her temple was remodeled into what many of you now know as the White House, or what used to be the White House before the flare hit. Dollar Bill couldn't prove it, but he believed she allowed this ground to be neutral so that she would always know who traveled in and out of this land, obsessed as she was with being all-seeing and all-knowing. Honestly, this was why he rarely came to DC for these neutral territory gatherings. Well, that and the fact that he hated the seductive pull Sarima had on all of those who encountered her. She was the Whore Queen in every sense of the word, and had successfully seduced every world ruler, human and angel alike, since the day she walked this earth in the flesh nearly 4,000 years ago. Shalom. made those that drank from her cup powerful amongst their wildest imaginations. It was why she had become the favorite of the master all those years ago. She was his deadliest weapon. He used her to control the 10 kings, who all competed for her affection, one of which was his very own father. The 10 kings does whatever the whore asks of them. No one knows who sired her, but many speculate that it was Baquel, one of the first watchers to be sent here, that now resides in the chains in darkness waiting to be released, where legend have it, if you believe in that kind of thing, that he is going to join the 10 kings in war against the Ancient of Days. Anyway, that's if you believe in that kind of thing. Dollar Bill wasn't one of those ones to give in to legend. He believed that one made their own future, their own destiny. Anyway, Sarima became the most powerful demigod to ever walk the earth. Imagine that. A half-breed, ruler of the Ancient Ones. Dala has watched his father grovel for her affection his whole life. She'd show him a little favor and then kick him out of her bed and bring another one of her lovers inside. She was the main reason why the 10 kings hated each other, and why, in order for them to all come together like today, it had to be done on neutral territory where the queen has forbidden any battles to be fought. She didn't waste her time with demigods like Dollar Bill or his brothers. She only dealt with the most powerful. All others barely tweaked her radar. But that was soon to change. If all goes according to plan, they will all know his name. Balaam had come to see him. The master had noticed him and was thinking about setting him up in her place. You see, the little whore queen system was in ruins. After thousands of years, she was finally losing her hold on the world. And Dala was here to see the nailing in her coffin. Yes, today was a special occasion indeed. Babylon the Great was falling, and now it was the time for him and his father's line to rule. Everything was falling into place quite nicely. He eyeballed the tall hooded beings standing on either side of the door that led down into the bowels of the earth. They were the Whore Queen's guards, here to make sure none of the blood fiends slipped past. They were also here to destroy any beings with ill will in their hearts towards Sarima. Taking a calm breath, Dala schooled his heart and mind so that the beings could not sense his excitement. Once he passed them, he exhaled, walking deeper into the earth. Down here there were no smooth walls and cement floors. This passageway had been cut out of the very stone. There were 2 more hooded figures standing outside the sliding door that led into the meeting room. He nodded to them as he walked through the door. The room that he entered, in its natural state, looked much like a cave. But thanks to Sarima witches and one of their powerful spells, it looked like a banquet hall today, teeming with servants that hurried around the room serving their masters. He saw his brother dressed in the white robes of the Pope sitting at a table reserved for his father's house and headed that way. As soon as he sat, a server hurried over to him to take his drink order.
I'll have a cup of tea and a glass of the house special. Ah, I see you finally achieved your popedom,
he told his brother when the servant hurried off to get his beverage.
Too bad the world is shot to hell and you have none to lord it over.
His brother chuckled.
And I see you're still pimping, although all your whores are blood fiends selling a little ass for a thigh bone to gnaw on.
He laughed a little harder. Dollar Bill ignored him as he scanned the crowd.
Where's father?
His brother gestured toward a table on the other side of the room.
Chatting with Tydell. Why? Are you frightened he's going to destroy you for killing Scott?
The server came back, placing a teacup in front of him and a wine glass full of warm blood. After he left again with his food order, his gaze shot back to his brother.
I didn't kill Scott.
The Pope shrugged before he lifted his own wine glass, taking a sip of the blood inside. It was a fresh batch.
You may not have killed him with your hands, but we all know you led those slayers to his nest by planting their women in his grasp.
Dollar Bill chuckled.
Nonsense. I was simply trying to help him achieve his goals. He wanted the woman. I gave him the woman. Besides, I'm sure Father has better things to worry about. Why, with her high ass calling this meeting and all.
His brother nodded with glee in his eyes.
She's losing her hold on the Ancient Ones. I'll do you one better, Dollar told him. She's losing her hold on the Master. Sit back and watch, brother. Babel the Great is getting ready to fall.
Al narrowed his eyes at his brother.
What do you have up your sleeve?
Dollar's smile turned deadly. Wouldn't his brother like to know what he had up his sleeve? You see, Dollar Bill had discovered a secret a long time ago. Everybody knew of the Master's hate toward man. But Dollar knew the Master harbored a special kind of hate for the priesthood of the Ancient of Days. That's why Dollar had chose to center all his work inside of those ghetto streets. Many, including his brothers, laughed at him, but they are fools. Dollar Bill gave birth to pimping. No lie. He put the very first pimp on the street while working closely with the writers and directors of movies like Superfly and The Mac, Dolomite. Yeah. He breathed life into it and watched it take off like wildfire. He'd solely been responsible for driving the great divide between the nigger man and the nigger woman. He gave birth to gang banging and dope slanging. And the whole time the others laughed at him for putting all his energy into what they thought was trivial matters. They teased him for living in the gutter amongst the sewer rats, while they all sat on top of the world. But little did they know, the Master had been watching, admiring how much Dollar Bill's inventions tore down the very people he hated most. The crackhead? Yep, Dollar Bill's greatest invention. His gaze settled on his brother.
All you need to know,
he finally spoke,
is not to be like Scott and challenge me. My position is secured.
And then he turned to face the front, just as the Ancient One that is known as the Patriot walked up to the podium.
Can I have everyone's attention?
He spoke into the mic. As the room settled down, Orel made his way back to his family's table. His murderous gaze came to Dollar Bill, promising to address the issue of Scott's death with him as soon as the gathering was over. Dollar just smiled and saluted his father with his wine glass.
As you know, Shalom, our great queen, and her team have reconstructed the grid, and we are now ready to relaunch the world currency.
The Patriot spoke with a huge grin on his face as the room erupted in applause. Fools, the lot of them. They have always put so much faith in the whore queen. Dollar couldn't wait to see their faces when she's exposed for the silly twat that she really is.
And I am pleased to say, it will be better than before.
The Patriot continued to speak.
This new technology will not only re-establish our servants' hold on mankind, but it will also tag our chattel so that we will know exactly where our food is at all times. But at last, I'm going to leave our queen to share this good news with you. So without further ado, may I present Sarima.
He gestured toward a spot next to him on the glass podium, and a holograph image of the whore appeared. Dollar rolled his eyes when he saw everyone come to their feet to applaud her, which of course meant he had to come to his feet and clap. Not to do so would draw too much attention, and he wasn't quite ready to show his hand yet. She sat on a golden throne from her palace underneath the ruins of the White House. So beautiful it was almost painful to look upon her. And like him, Dollar was sure that everyone in the room lusted after her. Women, men, and creatures alike. A red lace gown clung to her lush curves, leaving nothing to the imagination. Every delectable inch of her was on display. And even still, she held nothing on his butter. He made fun of his brother for obsessing over the woman Deborah to the point where he let down his guards enough for Dollar to slip through. But the fact is, Dollar Bill was the biggest hypocrite. He couldn't wait until the master gave him the whore seat so that he could finally have Butter Baby. Even though she'd age, he still desired her amongst all others. Her brown skin was still as flawless as when she was a girl, and that wild mane of brown hair, although now streaked with gray, still allured him, making him fantasize about balling his fist in it as he yanked her to him. His brother looked over at him.
"What?"
he hissed.
"You're clicking, jackass. Control your lust."
Dollar smirked. He didn't bother to tell his brother it was not the whore queen he lusted after. He allowed them to believe what they wanted. But he did take his brother's advice and thought of something other than the woman he couldn't wait to possess. "The flare was meant to stop us." Sarima's honeyed voice seeped over the crowd, causing all who heard her to instantly become aroused, desiring her. Dollar Bill bit down on his teeth, trying hard not to fall under its spell. "But it only made us stronger, my children." She dripped sex appeal with everything she did, every move she made, every word she uttered. It made any who was in her near facility, whether man, woman, or creature, to think about nothing but laying with her. No, he took that back. It made them crave sex with her. "We will have the control over whether they live or die," she cooed, her hypnotic voice easily controlling the room from where she sat on her golden throne. "Thanks to this new form of currency, we will control the very air they breathe." There was a gentle mutter in the room as everyone discussed the possibilities. They all thought that the flare ended their reign, and the one that they all feared was getting ready to move in and banish them to the eternal place of torment. Alabil exhaled, rolling his eyes. The foolish things the ancient ones believed. His father stood, and Sarima's salty gaze fell on him. "Orion, how are you, my love?" His father bowed his head slightly, trying to hide the fact that he blushed. It took everything within Dollar Bill not to throw his teacup at the back of his head.
"I am well, my queen, and you?"
She smiled. "On top of the world, my king. What troubles you, dear heart?"
"I worry, my queen, that it will take more than currency to gain world rulership. Before the flare, the people depended on us to govern their lives. We'd successfully caused mankind to forget how to sustain. Now, they've been forced to learn the old way, and governments have popped up all over the states. They are ruling themselves."
"Come now, Orion. Tell me you're not afraid of a few little men." Orion shook his head.
"No, my queen. Mortal men I do not fear. It's their spiritual counterparts they may oppose a problem."
The room once again erupted in quiet muttering. "Are you suggesting that their spiritual counterparts would dare defy me?" Sarima hissed. Orion went to shake his head no again, but before he can utter another voice swept over the room, causing all to grow stone silent.
He may not be suggesting that, but I certainly am.
Everybody turned in their seats, looking for the owner of that heavily accented voice. Balaam materialized in the center of the room, with his arms open wide.
Looking for me?
Balaam! Sarima cried, now standing from her throne. The hate she felt for the only other demigod that managed to snag the favor of the master was very evident on her beautiful face. Not only had Balaam become one of his favorites, the master had made him his high priest, an honor all demis dreamed of holding. None would dare challenge Balaam for the position. The wizard was too strong and would destroy any demi that even tried. Like Dollar Bill, Balaam liked to inhabit black bodies, but unlike Dollar, he chose Hamite flesh. Although he was as old as the queen herself, he appeared in a strong body. "How did you get past my witches?" Sarima sneered. Balaam looked at her startled, before he held back his head and laughed. As if cued, one of said witches came from the back carrying a tray with the wine glass of the house special on it. It stopped in front of the old wizard and bowed to him before offering him the blood.
"Oh, my dear, these witches?"
he said before he lifted the glass and took a sip.
"Don't insult my intelligence."
He gestured for the witch to leave him. It's believed that Balaam and Sarima were in fact siblings, but none could prove it, and neither of them will ever admit it. Their hate for each other was legendary. Sarima gathered herself and retook her seat. "What can I do for you, wizard? As you know, you are not welcomed here."
"Nonsense. This is neutral territory. I have just as much right to be here as anyone else. And then there's the small fact that I am the highest ranking wizard here, and as you can see, your little witches don't stand a chance of defeating me. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, who's going to make me leave?"
Now, technically, either of the 10 kings could. Balaam may be the most powerful warlord and the master's high priest, but he was still a demigod and could never be as powerful as one of the gods. Neither would Sarima, for that matter. The only reason these two were as brazen as they were and spoke with such authority in the midst of the gods was because they both held a special place to the master, and neither of the 10 kings wanted to upset him by destroying his 2 favorite pets. Sarima's beautiful eyes flashed red, and her nails turned into talons, but amazingly, she didn't take the bait and stayed sitting on her throne.
"What do you want?"
The voice was not honeyed anymore. It was that of a hissing demon that was ready to kill. Dollar Bill wondered at the body she now possessed. Somehow, she grows human women that could sustain her wretched spirit for a good while. At least, he thinks it's a good while. For all he knows, she's donning and shedding bodies daily. Hell, there was no telling. He remembered before the flare hit, she, like most of these demigods, had chose to live in the limelight. Because she craved worship, she often inhabited the body of the top female superstars. And just like she did with everybody else, she used them until she wore their bodies down and then discarded them. Most who didn't die from the wear and tear OD'd on drugs or committed suicide afterwards. Of course, only after gentle suggestions from Sarima herself. She couldn't risk any of them speaking out in their bitterness about the spirit that possessed them, and then help them receive fame and riches beyond their imaginations, only to abandon them. Nowadays, Dollar didn't know where she got these amazing bodies from. The only thing he could guess is that she was, in fact, harvesting them. None of them had ever been in her nest. She didn't trust any but her servants to be that close to her. She always met her lovers in other places, like the chateau in Paris her and his father liked to rendezvous in.
There is no secret. We share no love for each other, my beauty. But there's one thing we do have in common. Neither of us want to see this great nation fall.
Balaam's voice rang out across the hall, now gaining everyone's attention once again.
But I'm afraid, my dear, that no matter how you try, you can't prevent the Exodus. Don't believe him, my queen. He cannot be trusted.
The patriot spat from where he still stood on the podium.
For decades, he sent us on that wild goose chase searching for Moses' staff, only to come up empty-handed. If the Exodus can't be prevented, why is he looking for the staff like that? Unless you want it found for other reasons. Oh, come now, Paquel. Are you still sour about what happened with the law boys? That was ages ago, old man. Get over it already.
The sound of the patriot's nails scraping across the glass podium filled the room as he balled up his hands into fists. Dollar Bill grinned at the wizard's bravery. Sure, the master would be upset and would probably destroy the patriot if he hurt Balaam. That doesn't change the fact, though, that the Malek, or God, would have the wizard torn apart before the master could even get a hold of him. Not a risk Dollar Bill was ready to take yet. But if all goes according to his plan, he will become the master's next pet after the Whore Queen dies, and he will have control of the 10 kings. Then his father will have to acknowledge his brilliancy. However, he was aware that he could not trust Balaam. Who really knew what the wizard had up his sleeve? The only thing Dollar Bill knew for sure is he wanted to see the Whore Queen's rule brought to an end just as much as he did, and yes, he wanted Moses' staff. But Balaam was slippery, and for all Dollar knew, he was trying to set him up as well. Just like he had the patriot and the law boys searching for that staff, he'd had Dollar Bill searching for it in the lion's den, an endeavor that cost him his fleshy body. Hell yeah, he had feelings about that. But the fact still remains. Balaam is one of the most powerful demis, and if Dollar was going to achieve his goal of obtaining the master seat, the position that the Whore Queen held at the moment, he was going to need the wily old wizard's help.
I did that for your own good,
Balaam continued, berating the patriot. Only he or Sarima would dare.
It was foolish to put all your faith in the Slayer anyhow. I don't care how much you thought you were in his head. They are wired to always return to the Ancient of Days. But as for the staff, my good friends, I believe I may have found it.
He held up his hand, overriding the spell the Queen's witches was casting on the room, to shift the image of the high golden ceilings of the banquet hall, changing it to that of a man on his knees in the center of a field of wildflowers that was full of bees, their buzzing louder than that of the gentle chatter of the hall. The man's hands rested on his heavily muscled thighs, and judging by his powerful build and the sword draped over his back, there was no doubt in any of their minds that he was definitely a slayer. With his dark skin, at first glance he resembled Gideon. His long hair that had turned gray from age was braided in long cornrows that came to rest in the center of his back. But when the image turned to show his fierce features, it was clear it wasn't Gideon. All of the warrior's eyes were closed in either meditation or prayer. As if he could sense their presence, he sneered, and a golden tooth flashed in the darkness. Zion, Balaam's obsession, and Lion's and Gideon's southern counterpart.
I've stalked this man since the day he was born.
Balaam began to speak to the room.
And this whole time I have been so blind. Looking for a staff in this day is as futile as looking for the lamb. For it was written, the first time he came as the lamb, but he returns as the lion. We are truly blind guides leading the blind, foolishly looking for a staff when we should be looking for a weapon of war.
Right then the warrior stood to his feet and slowly drew the deadly sword from the sheath on his back. Everyone in the room except for the queen gasped. The sword looked to be made of pure onyx that flashed black as the master's eyes in the night. Many had heard of this sword, but only a few had ever seen it, and the few that had seen it no longer lived to tell anyone about it. A demon's worst nightmare that thing was. Its slice not only killed the flesh, but it sent the spirit of the demon to the place of eternal darkness. Once there, one's soul was stuck until judgment. No more chances to touch, to taste, to feel. Just the cold, deathly touch of nothing. Complete and utter darkness. Dallas shivered. So glad Zion and his crew wasn't his responsibility to destroy. Hell, he had his hand full with Lion and his squad. He'd been trying to kill that bastard since birth. However, with Balaam now on his side, things were going to be different. It was only a matter of time before the head of the lion is mounted on his wall. And damn, he couldn't wait. This isn't Moses' staff, you idiot. Zion's sword is made of onyx. Moses' staff is made of wood, Sarima hissed. Balaam exhaled long and loud.
Look at the handle, your majesty.
The image changed to draw in closer to the sword held in the mighty warrior's hands. At first glance, the handle too looked to be made of onyx. But as if they were looking through the lens of a camera, Balaam drew the image very close to the warrior's hand where a bee had fallen asleep. And sure enough, it was clear to see that the handle was in fact made of wood. No, it can't be, the queen gasped, her shock reflecting all of theirs. The glass dollar held in his hand nearly shattered. All this time the staff has been right under his nose. Balaam turned to face him as if he could hear his thoughts.
Have any of you ever tried to step foot on the Kingsley plantation?
Although he looked at Dollar Bill, he spoke to the room as a whole. Kingsley Plantation is the land Zion owned. It had been given to his great-grandfather by the old plantation owner. Balaam shook his head.
It can't be done. You've spent all your time and resources trying to get into the lion's den, when the Kingsley Plantation is 400 acres of untouchable soil. Have you ever wondered why?
He asked, opening his arms as he turned and looked at the room. Do you think I'm a fool? Of course I have eyes on that area. There's not one of the slayers whose every step is not reported to me daily, the queen hissed. Balaam shrugged casually.
And yet you didn't see this,
he said, shifting his hand so that the image of the warrior's sword was magnified. Insulted, the queen lifted her chin in the air and waved her hand, overriding Balaam's spell, causing the image of Zion to disappear and the golden dome ceiling of the banquet hall to reappear. We don't know if that is the staff. You're only speculating. Balaam shrugged.
Maybe you're right. Or maybe you're an even bigger fool than your precious husband was.
A collective gasp went throughout the room. Everybody knew speaking of the queen's late mortal husband was a no-no. It was said he was the only man she actually loved. A mortal. Imagine that. She'd put all her energy into making him the most powerful ruler to ever walk the earth. So much so, he was worshipped as a god even to this day. Hell, she'd successfully convinced him that he was God. That was until he was struck down and killed by the grandson of Abraham. Dollar Bill agreed with Balaam. The old king sounded like a damn fool to him. Sarima lifted her head as if she'd been slapped. Dollar ducked his head to chuckle, exchanging looks with his father and his brother before lifting his teacup and taking a sip. Damn, he didn't expect it to go down like this. He was so happy he decided to come today. How dare you come into my house and speak ill of my heart, Sarima hissed.
I dare, because had your husband listened to me and killed Abraham when he was just a baby, and not strong enough to call on his power, none of this would be happening. Hell, had Pharaoh listened to me and killed Moses when his daughter pulled him out the water, he would have never gotten a chance to find the staff in the first place. You betrayed Balak,
the patriarch began, but Balaam cut him dead off.
The king you put on the throne of Edom was a fool. There is no way you can curse what the Ancient of Days have blessed. I've told you all that over and over again. It was me who showed you how to get the children of Jacob to curse themselves. It was me who showed you their weakness.
His gaze fell back to Sarima.
It was me who put the spirit of destiny in your beautiful hands. And now you're losing it. You've become so obsessed with stopping the Exodus. But it can't be stopped.
His gaze saddened.
And I've become obsessed with finding the staff, I'll admit. So obsessed that I missed the resurface of his counterpart.
He held up his hand, overriding Sarima's spell. But this time he caused the whole banquet hall to mold and shape around them, until they were all sitting on the ground in a wooded area. Their servants nowhere to be seen. The fine meal they'd been feasting on changed to a beat-up tin bowl full of foul-smelling beans sitting in their laps. Dollar Bill's chuckle turned into a laugh. This is why he messed with Balaam. He was an even bigger bastard than him. The 10 kings stood to their feet, angrily throwing the bowls of beans to the side.
What is this nonsense?
Oriel spat.
Change the room back at once!
With a grin on his face, Balaam put his finger to his mouth, shushing him, just as the hauntingly beautiful sound of a violin filled the clearing. Everything else seemed to darken except for a hill just up ahead. Standing on the hill, looking like something not of this earth, were 5 people. Dollar Bill recognized Butter's daughter instantly. He'd only known one other woman with hair that color brown, and it was her mother. The pregnant young woman on the hill was a spitting image of her. Before Dollar could catch himself, the clicking escaped his throat. In this state of arousal, it was hard for him to hold his human form. He didn't need a mirror to know that his eyes were slits and that his tongue was forked. Standing up a little higher on the hill, just to the left of Butter's daughter, was a light-skinned older woman. It was her playing the violin. Her body moved in jerky movements as if she was under its possession. In fact, they all moved as if they were under a possession. All of their eyes were closed, and they gently swayed from right to left as if one unit. Dollar frowned. What the hell was going on here?
Not many of you Demis will recognize that wood, but your fathers sure do.
Balaam spoke into the night. Dollar's gaze went to his father, and sure enough, he looked as if he was seeing a ghost.
Zion's sword is made of the same wood. Maybe you're right, my queen, and the staff is still out there. But what does it matter? The tree that was cut down has begun to grow its new crown, and the children of Zion will soon depart this land.
He closed his eyes and began to sway to the sound that the beautiful instrument made.
Enjoy this music, because the days soon come that the sound of the harpists and the sound of the musicians and the flutists and the trumpets shall not be heard in you any more at all, and no craftsman of any trade shall be found in you any more at all, and the sound of the millstone shall not be heard in you any more at all, and the light of a lamp shall not shine in you any more at all, and the voice of the bridegroom and that of the bride shall not be heard in you any more at all, for your merchants were great ones of the earth.
His gaze sharpened as he looked at Sarima.
But we all know it's the children of Jacob that's its flavor. Just ask Pharaoh. Any place without them is as bland as unseasoned chicken.
The sad look disappeared from Balaam's face before an evil grin took its place.
Tell me, my queen, how will you ever attract any more suitors if you lose your seasoning?
Right then, the sound of horse hooves coming from behind them caused them all to turn and look, just as Monroe thundered past them on the back of a white horse, whose mighty gallop caused chunks of earth to fly up in its wake. The white leather duster the warrior wore bellowed behind him like a pair of great wings. When he got to the hill, he brought the horse to a stop, dismounting as he took in the scene before him. Because it was only a simulation, neither of them batted an eye about being in the presence of such a powerful slayer. Sarima, who still sat observing the scene from her golden throne, eyes narrowed appreciatively on the handsome white-haired man. Balaam's spell was not strong enough to penetrate her lair, so her hologram sat untouched. You see, that's where you're wrong, old warrior, she finally spoke. She was so turned on by the image of the warrior, she was now purring her words.
And listen close, because here's where Sarima's power lied. Because they were still in the cave, the scent of her arousal easily encompassed them, holding them all enslaved. Neither of them could think of anything else but laying with her. Dollar Bill was no longer in control of his lust. He inhaled deeply, taking in her essence, hungry for her like he'd been hungry for no other woman before. Even Balaam was not immune and had fallen easily under her spell. Very aware of the hold she now held on them, a seductive grin came on her beautiful face as her hologram image stood and began to sashay toward the white-haired warrior. So graceful were her steps,
it looked as if she glided across the clearing. The long lace train of the red dress that clung to her plush body appeared to be red vines that intertwined in the earth as she walked. They all marveled when her hologram seemed to unravel like silk the closer she got to the warrior, leaving her standing there in the flesh by the time she came to a stop in front of him. She had clearly taken over Balaam's spell, because just then Monroe turned to face her. The look on his face resembled the look they all now wore, that of hunger. Slowly he went down to his knees in front of her, his face coming level with her plump breasts that thrust toward him, barely hidden behind the lace. Gently she brought her hand up to caress his strong jaw. I've ruled the world for 4,000 years. Although she was talking to Balaam, she'd not taken her gaze from the extremely handsome man that kneeled in front of her. As she continued to caress his jaw and neck, he closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. And in all that time, many like yourself have wondered where my secret lies. I assure you what happened to Pharaoh shall not happen to me. What with Egypt being only an imitation of the real thing. She slightly parted her legs, causing the long split in the dress to open so that the majority of her right leg and thigh showed. Then she used the hand that was not caressing Monroe to start at her knee and slowly work up to her thigh. They were all now leaning close, clearly caught in her web. The image of Monroe concentrated on that hand as well. When I tell them, they think I'm lying, but the recipe of my wine comes from here, in between my thighs, she cooed, bringing her hand to rest over her mound. Dollar Bill swallowed, wishing his lips was that hand. Just one little taste, that's all it takes to become addicted to my mystery wine. She brought the hand that caressed her mound to Monroe's lips, smiling when he opened his mouth to take them between. With her other hand, she rubbed his head. What a very good boy you are, my pet. Drink up, take all that you can get. While he sucked on her fingers, her seductive gaze came to Balaam. One side of his mouth lifted in a grin. Although they were enemies, he couldn't help but be impressed with her ability. You say that I should worry that Jacob's seed is fleeing from my womb. And I say to you that if you think they had a hard time let go of Egypt, just let them try to let me go. Babylon the Great. Within my walls, they can obtain anything that's in their wildest imagination. Fancy cars, nice clothes, rich foods, jewelry, fame, fortune. What? What was that? Would they like something darker, you ask? Would you care for a little girl? Or maybe even a little boy? She shrugged. Within my walls, we don't judge. Anything is possible. Just think, then want it, and be willing to do anything to obtain it. Her gaze went back to Monroe, just as he began to lift his head, presenting her with his neck. Her eyes flashed red before her fangs protruded, and she sunk them in his neck, slurping loud of his blood. When she lifted her head again, blood dripped from her teeth. She walked away, letting the body fall at her feet. But at last, Balaam, unlike Pharaoh,
I will not let his people go.
She smiled, and when next she spoke, her voice was sweet and gentle again. At least, not alive. And then she turned and walked back toward her golden throne, her flesh turning back into that of a hologram as she went. The forest disappeared around them, leaving them all back standing in the hall, but this time there were no tables, just a long golden pool that sat in front of the queen's glorious throne. You don't have to worry about me losing the spirit of destiny, wizard. I will use everything within my arsenal to keep it. You know the difference between Pharaoh and me? They should have never sent a man to do a woman's job. Grab a seat. I'll show you how this is done. Balaam nodded his head once. As you wish, your majesty. The 10 kings were now good and worried. His father was damn near wringing his hands.
But my queen, if you do this, you understand that you will have to do this without our assistance. It is not time for us to fight against the Ancient of Days. The others have not risen yet to assist us.
The patriot spoke, trying to get her to see reason. The look she gave him spoke volumes of what she really thought of him and his kind. Please. If I was depending on you cowards to get things done, I would have never gotten where I am today. Begone from my sight and let me handle this like I always do. Babylon the Great shall rise again. You mocked my words. It shall rise again. and then she was gone, causing the room they were in to turn back into the dank cave. Angrily, the 10 kings, their children, and their servants hurried out of the cave, each in haste to make it to the safety of their own nests. This was the moment they all had feared. The queen was getting ready to launch an all-out attack against the children of Zion, and whether they liked it or not, it was time for them to prepare for war. Dollar Bill fell into step next to Balaam, who took his time leaving the cage.
You are a clever old bastard, convincing the whore queen to leave it all out there on the field like that.
Balaam smiled.
Indeed, Babylon the Great shall fall, and she will take many of those damn slayers down with her.
Dollar Bill returned his smile before nodding gently.
Yes, my good friend, and what a glorious day it shall be.